Hi, I'm Julia Cowley, a retired FBI profiler and host of the true crime podcast, The Consult, Real FBI Profilers. If you're fascinated with true crime and criminal profiling, then join us as we discuss real cases and examine the behavior exhibited before, during, and after the commission of the crime. You can listen to The Consult wherever you get your podcasts. It's as close as it gets to being in the room with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, we conclude our look at the Isdal Woman. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my Onavolgbar co-host, Alice.
I'm glad you came up with that because, we promised people 5 episodes of Isdal Woman, and here we are on 6. So you had to come in strong with a descriptor, and I've got to think that you've been practicing that all week because I could never say that.
So that means inimitable in Dutch, which they speak in Belgium.
Belgish.
In Belgium.
To go with our theme of our Isdal Woman.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that and for all the help over the course of these episodes as we have looked at this great mystery. Alice, I've really enjoyed this one. Have you enjoyed this one? I feel like we're finishing up today.
We are probably finishing up today, as she said, hopefully, but I've loved this because I will say it started out as a complete mind boggler to me. And I was afraid I wouldn't reach a conclusion because it is a very mind-boggling case and it is incredibly mysterious. One of the most mysterious, I think, that we've ever covered. But I think I'm going to come up with a conclusion.
You've got it? You got it solved?
I don't know that it's solved, but I think I have centered on a conclusion because there are times when I haven't centered on a conclusion,
Yeah, and look, this one's been so much fun to me just because of all the listener interaction. I mean, we've had so many great emails from people pointing out little things like, remember how we talked about it was weird that she had furs and skirts? Well, apparently that's what people wear, especially in Eastern Europe. They like to wear their furs and their skirts. So, hey.
Makes sense. If you're going to wear skirts, it's going to be cold.
I guess you got to
load up the furs.
Hot up top because you can be cold down below, right? So,
hot up
anyways,
top.
Stuff like that. Great stuff. And we have some more listener comments we wanted to start off with as we embark on this finale. So this one, I'm not going to say the person's name because they get into some personal stuff in this email, but I thought this one was worth reading. So this person says, to me, this is a clear suicide. I think she went to Norway as one additional way of ending your life after intentional overdose is to let hypothermia set in. Plus, it is beautiful. This is how I have tried to, this person has attempted to take their own life before. Take a lot of crushed pills mixed with juice and lie down in a cold place, a scenic place, and let nature do its thing. Trouble with best laid plans when your mind is altered is it becomes hard to follow them. Whatever she found herself doing in life, suicide was the only way out, and she was prepared with backup plans. Pentobarbital is always lethal. She added alcohol to the mix. It is very bitter to take, and I would bet she used sugar. Because remember, there was sugar. As a follow-up or to mix with crushed or powdered tablets, they are then easier to take. The fire happened because she was so intoxicated. Maybe she wanted to burn some final items, which I think is pretty clear she did want to do. Maybe she wanted to add immolation to the outcome. It happens sometimes. You feel contaminated, and fire destroys contamination. So number one, I want to say thank you to that person because, like I said, that was a very personal email. But I think also adds some insight into the possible state of mind of this woman. As we've said, we're going to get to theories, and a big theory is that she did take her own life. So something to think about as we transition into that.
Yes, thank you to that reader for trusting us with their story and for sharing that bit as well. By the way, I just want to say that is, someone recently asked me, I was doing an interview for like my alumni magazine, and they asked me what I loved most about the podcast. And what I said was, it's not what you think. It's not that we get to record really interesting cases with my best friend. Actually, it's the community and the unintended consequences of the stories that we get to talk about, such as this. Because I think all of us, when we listen to any story, especially something like Isdal Woman, we are seeking to understand the mysterious of life. And the reason, at least for me, a big reason of trying to understand the mysterious is I'm trying to understand myself and those around me who I love. So it's very introspective, and this email is an example of that. So thank you for sharing that part of yourself with us. And also it makes me have a renewed empathy for the way we cover these cases as well, because I recognize we're not just talking about Isdal Woman. We may be talking about something very personal to you all, even if you yourself are not Isdal Woman, but you may see yourself in Isdal Woman. So with that, we have more listener insights, which are always wonderful to hear from. So this is from Lisbeth. She's a Belgian listener, and she had some thoughts on the Isdal Woman's repeated Belgian addresses. So according to both the English and Dutch Wikipedia listings, the aliases include Geneviève Lancière, born in Leuven, living at Rue Saint-Walburg 2, Leuven. Then there's Claudia Telt, born in Brussels, living at Place Saint-Walburg 17, Brussels. Another Claudia Tilt was born in Brussels, living at Rue de la Madeleine 3, Brussels.
And before you continue, I didn't look at it closely enough, that the Claudia Tilt alias used two different addresses, which it seems, the level of complexity. Mm-hmm.
But both in Brussels, which is really interesting.
In Brussels. But think about this. And maybe they don't. Maybe her identity documents don't include an address. But if they did, then she has two different Claudia Tilt IDs with two different addresses on them, both in Brussels.
And note, like the Geneviève and the first Claudia Tilt both use like a same core, but not the exact same street address. So it's one's Rue Saint-Walburg 2, the other's Place Saint-Walburg 17. And this is really interesting because I don't know about you, but I think I've shared this before, where I know that everyone's always stealing your identity. So whenever I sign up for something that asks for I can't go past it, and it's something stupid like I have to put in my birth date in order to register my kid for soccer, I put the wrong birthday on purpose, but by one. So I'll say 1 day off my birthday, because I know what they actually want to check is that I'm over the age of 18. So I'm not lying about my age, but I don't want you to know my actual birthday. So I usually put it just a little bit off. And I think this is interesting because there's another alias that she uses, Claudia Nielsen, who's born in Ghent, living at Rue Saint-Walburg 18, Brussels. Note there's 3 St. Walburgs, all different, the place, Boulevard, Rue. Those are different, but the main word is the same. And then the number is off by just a little, 17, 18, 2, which is interesting. Is that close to maybe something that is home to her? It might not be her actual home, but maybe that address actually means something for her to be able to remember it. And then she continues to use different aliases, as Lisbeth tells us. Alexia Zarn Marchez, born in Ljubljana, living at Rue Saint Hildegard 81, Brussels. I know I'm butchering all of these. I'm so sorry to our friends who actually know how to say these things. Vera Jarl was born in Antwerp, and there's a Brussels address form that's lost in that instance. She uses another name, Fenella Lork, a Brussels address form that's also lost. And then an Elizabeth Lienhauer, which is often misspelled, born in Ostend, living at Philipstockstraat 44A, Brussels. Lisbeth says, what strikes me is that every single identity uses a Belgian address, regardless of stated birthplace. That feels deliberate. Either Belgium was an operational base or it was a familiar identity shell she repeatedly relied on. Now the linguistic angle is interesting. By 1970, cities like Ghent and Leuven were firmly Dutch-speaking in official street usage. Leuven had switched decades earlier, and Ghent underwent active Dutchification of street names in the 1960s. Yet, several of her addresses are given in French, even in Flemish cities. So that suggests either outdated knowledge, exposure mainly through French-speaking channels, or someone not deeply familiar with the linguistic reality on the ground. Then there's the repeated use of Saint Walburg. Saint Walburga, is venerated in Germany and also associated with Liege in French-speaking Wallonia near Belgium's German-speaking region. The repetition of that specific saint name combined with the use of French and German, post-World War I Italian migration to mining regions around Liege, which in turn could explain her, quote, olive complexion and that she smelled of garlic, makes me wonder whether she may have lived in or around Liege for some time. It would neatly connect the French usage, the German familiarity, the saint reference, and the broader cultural mix of that region in the mid-20th century. From a Belgian perspective, the addresses don't feel randomly invented. They feel like someone with partial but regionally specific familiarity, possibly centered in Eastern, French-speaking Belgium. Curious what you guys think. P.S. In Belgium, the northern part is Flemish, Dutch, and the southern part is Walloon, French. Some eastern parts in the French region are German, see the World Wars, and Brussels is predominantly French, though officially bilingual.
A lot of just really interesting stuff there. And like I said, just really glad this person decided to write in and gives you not only some flavor about her and about Belgium, but just this mystery is so rich. I mean, there is so much here to dive into. Just all these different angles. We have just enough evidence in this case to lead us in 1,000 different directions. And as I said earlier, we get all this stuff and it just makes it more complex. You know, this is the weird case where the more information you learn, more evidence narrows down the possibilities. Every piece you learn, you're getting closer and closer to the truth. And I just feel like with this case, it's just like every piece of evidence is just a twist and sort of points you, your old theories are still possible, because usually it doesn't rule anything out, but now new possibilities are coming in. Like this is the first time this possibility of some sort of Italian heritage comes in. And remember, you know, there's Italy, there's Switzerland, there's Germany. We think she was born close to Nuremberg, but all these things are imprecise, right? I mean, we're using ideas and technologies and techniques that are only recently invented that are pretty effective and pretty accurate, but have some volatility. And so without that specificity, it does sort of open up all these different possibilities. So I don't know. I just thanks so much to both these people who wrote in, to all of you who've written in. This is probably our last episode, but that doesn't mean you have to stop writing in if you're listening to this and you have more information, more thoughts. I mean, this is certainly something we can do a follow-up on as people think about this case, because although we're going to have theories and they're going to be brilliant, I doubt we're going to entirely solve this case tonight. So more information is always welcome. All right. Alice, did you have anything else on that?
No, this is awesome information because only someone who lives there and knows of the history of when different languages were adopted or the way street names were changed is so helpful. So thank you for writing in, Lisbeth. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it. So your dollar goes a long way.
Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. Guys, I don't know about you, but when it's cold, or when it's snowing outside in particular, what I want is something warm, something hearty, something cozy that makes me feel better about the world around me. And that's where Cook Unity comes in, because I can get fresh, wonderfully designed meals without having to go out into the cold, without having to have something delivered to me. It's all there with Cook Unity. We all know it. Cooking quality meals takes time, but it doesn't have to be your time. There's no cleanup or meal planning. Meals are delivered fully cooked. Just heat up in as little as 5 minutes. You can enjoy culinary masterpieces for way less than restaurants or takeout and climbing grocery store prices. I recently had the beef tinga tacos by Akhtar Nawab, and it was amazing. Classic Mexican dish. Blow your mind. These are the kind of things you can get at Cook Unity.
You guys know I am always thinking about what meal to serve next, and I just love that Cook Unity is part of our family's rhythm because there's a huge variety of options and fresh ingredients to choose from. You can choose from a rotating seasonal menu of over 300 meals or let Cook Unity's platform provide personalized recommendations. And if you have a special diet, no problem. There are over 25 plus diets and cuisines, so you can always match your cravings with your wellness goals, or in my case, all the different opinions we have around our table because I have 4 kids, but they love everything from Cook Unity. And there are new celebrity chefs who are always joining, like New York City restaurateur Marcus Samuelsson or Michelin-starred Rick Bayless. Taste comfort and craftsmanship in every bite from the award-winning chefs behind Cook Unity. Go to cookunity.com/prosecutors or enter code prosecutors before checkout to get 50% off your first order. That's 50% off your first order by using code prosecutors or going to cookunity.com/prosecutors.
Did you know that skincare can start in the laundry room? All Free Clear is the #1 laundry detergent brand recommended by dermatologists, allergists, and pediatricians for sensitive skin. All Free Clear is 100% free of dyes and perfumes. It provides an effective clean that's gentle on skin while removing impurities like dirt and body oil without leaving irritating residues. Plus, All Free Clear liquid is Safer Choice certified by the U.S. EPA. For a clean you can feel good about, all you need is All Free Clear.
Okay, let's talk about one of the most interesting and confusing aspects in this case, her smell. So this is a striking thing. It's as striking as her use of language and her many different identities is the fact that she has been described as smelling like garlic. So what can we make of that? So remember, the store clerk at the boot shop, who still works there to this day, as we said, commented that she had an unusual smell. So she's incredibly well put together. She's striking. She's polished. She looks like a lady of class. You know, she's attractive. This guy found her to be attractive, but the smell was off-putting. And later on, he would decide this was garlic. At the time, garlic was not popular in Norway. It was not a smell he was familiar with. But when he later became familiar with garlic, it instantaneously reminded him of the Isdal Woman. And the fact that she had this unusual smell was something that multiple people commented on. He was the one who really identified garlic. Others would say it was sort of a spicy smell, a pungent aroma, like maybe she was wearing an exotic perfume. So it could be something like that. But let's assume for a second that it actually was a garlic smell that he smelled. What could account for that? Garlic, yes, but also onions, certain Eastern European dishes, certain fish preparations, and perhaps most intriguingly, certain cured meats can all have a garlic smell and can all cause someone to smell of garlic. So it's possible this could have been something she brought along with her, particularly if it's cured meat, which is something that she could take easily in her travels. Now, we don't find any cured meat in her stuff, so she would have had to have eaten it all. And we know that she took her entire life with her in those 2 bags, so the fact that we don't see it maybe puts a damper on that potential theory, but cured meat is a possibility.
So what else can smell like garlic? Arsenic poisoning, industrial compounds, organ failure, specifically the liver or kidneys. But there's one thing in particular that could have caused this smell: sulfur-based treatment for skin conditions. In fact, these treatments were the standard treatment in German-speaking countries, with German spa towns emphasizing these treatments. And the further east you went, the more popular these treatments were. And wouldn't you know it, a cream for eczema was found in her belongings, though this was a cream prescribed in Norway that did not have a smell. Still, it shows she did have some sort of a skin problem that could have been treated with these kinds of creams. So it's worth noting that Isdal was often described as wearing multiple layers, long sleeves, all of which could have been used to cover skin irritation. So I had been thinking about this a lot because the smell was so pungent or noticeable despite her looking pretty put together. And we know that she had access, for example, to a shower because everywhere she went, she stayed somewhere. So it's not like she was a vagrant living on the streets who may have had bodily odor because she didn't have access to a shower. I've thought a lot about the fact that people noticed it, not so much with what she ate, because you'd have to be continuously eating the garlic for so many people in different times of the day and different days to notice the smell. I've always thought this must be something emanating from her. And the first thing that came to mind was liver disease. We know that that's a very common smell of death, right? Like this is why you can have dogs that are trained to be able to sense cancers or other things about you, because your body can give off smells that are often not able to be placed because we're not familiar with those types of smells. So it could be garlic smelling, but it's not actually garlic. So it's even harder, of course, to say it's garlic smelling if you don't have exposure to the actual garlic. But I thought this arsenic poisoning was really interesting, because if we go along this theory of she's a spy, I mean, who knows what kind of spy, but we have some idea that it maybe has to do with the Navy, weapons testing, something like that. That would be interesting if she's having to hang out a lot around metal working places that may be giving off arsenic or other sort of sulfuric acids that may be being absorbed into her skin. That's a very, I think, sexy theory. But maybe the fact that we do know that she has eczema cream and that she covers herself up, which could just be modesty, or that it's kind of colder weather. She does have furs. Right, it's colder weather. I think it may, a lot is pointing to this whole German heaviness of her potential origin or the time that she spent there. So whatever it may be, I tend to lean towards not so much eating of the garlic, but rather something about her that's emanating this smell that allows people to smell it so often and also not be able to point to it.
So I think this is the answer. I think it's some sort of skin treatment. And I didn't see this really in any other coverage of this case, this theory. So this is Brett and Alice original here. So, I mean, I think organ failure is an interesting idea. If this were a Sherlock Holmes book or a movie, the answer would be organ failure. Or House, the answer would be organ failure. And what would be happening here is she's dying. She knows she's dying. She's gone to Norway for some reason. Maybe, she's meeting with people that she knew from Norway, her friends or her family, or like long estranged people. And those are the people you see her with in the cafe and in her room. And that's why they seem unhappy, because she's telling them, like, I'm dying, right? And she decided she was going to end her life in her own way, on her own terms. And she went up to that beautiful mountain and she took these pills and she ended her life because she knew she was going to die. Now, there's an autopsy on her and it doesn't reveal anything, right, as far as her organs, but I don't think they would have been looking. I don't think if it was some sort of disease, I don't necessarily think they would have noticed that she had something like this, given how she died.
But I will note one other thing. The reason I veer away from the organ failure is that if it were liver failure, her eyes would have been yellow, for example. Like, you can't have that level of organ failure and not have the whites of your eyes be a very distinct yellow. That is something very distinctive that people would have picked up on. No one has noted that she looks sickly, that her eyes are like a very unhealthy color, that no one mentioned her looking sickly, in fact. And if you are at that level of organ failure, you will look gaunt. Your skin will look like it's dehydrated. You will look like you are ill. And no one mentioned that. In fact, what they say about her is that she looks very put together, that she's very beautiful. She's striking. And typically, when people say someone's striking or beautiful, there can be another corollary for it. It's youth and vigor, right? You would probably not describe someone who looks sickly to be striking and beautiful.
And this is not a House episode or a Sherlock Holmes episode. So I don't think it was liver failure, organ failure. But I do think there's a very strong possibility that she was using some sort of skin cream that made her smell like garlic. I mean, if you've never used anything like this, just think of like Icy Hot, right? And how it smells, and you're using something like that. And I think the fact that we know for a fact that whatever was going on with her skin was bad enough that while she's in Norway doing whatever she's doing, she's also stopping at a pharmacy to pick up something for eczema, right? So it's possible she ran out of whatever she had, for instance. So she certainly had some sort of skin condition. And the fact that treatments for skin conditions, particularly in German areas, particularly the further east she went, created this garlic smell. I think this is the answer. I don't think it was that she just ate so much garlic it's pouring out of her pores. I think she was using some sort of skin cream.
And I'll take this one bit further. So up until there, I completely agree with you. I think the facts all point towards it. I'll go one step further that is more like conjecture. But I have a cousin who has really bad skin. Like the doctors can't really diagnose it exactly. It's like eczema, but basically she's this beautiful young lady, very talented and everything, but her skin just flakes off. Like it looks like snake scales all the time. And she's very, very self-conscious about it. I know because I kind of had that with my hands when I was younger. Like the doctors couldn't figure out what it was. It would just like crack and they would flake off. Not anymore, which is amazing. But I remember when I was younger, I was so self-conscious about my hands because they looked really scary. They looked like snake scales. I would never hold hands with anyone. Like at school, if you had to hold hands in line or something, I would never hold hands with anyone. I always pulled my sleeves over my hands, like I held my clothes like this. And my cousin is similar. She's now an adult and she still has this skin condition, but hers is all over her body, her legs, her torso, her shoulders. And she is always, even in the hottest of weathers, wearing pants and long sleeve shirts because she feels so self-conscious. I note this because remember her autopsy. So she's a 42-ish-year-old woman. So she's past the age that many people in that generation would have gotten married. And we know that what the autopsy said is she was a woman who was of childbearing years who'd never born a child. Now that we know she's a little bit older based on her teeth, she's actually on her way to being outside of the realm of childbearing years. I think this is notable in that she has been described as attractive or striking, but she seems to be single. Everywhere she's going, if she's talking to men, it's platonic seemingly, and it seems to be for some business purpose. She's not traveling and checking in with a man. She doesn't appear to be married or traveling with like a partner, and she at least has never had children. Perhaps this skin condition has separated her from being, in her mind perhaps, being able to have the normal life of having a husband and children. And so she's picked another life of maybe counterintelligence or something along those lines. But I do think it's notable that there may have been something physical about her that was so personal that she may have taken all these extreme measures to heal, and it's not totally healed, but may be part of her origin story of why is this woman traveling all over Europe by herself? We know that she doesn't have children, biological children, and it appears that she is unattached to a male, at least in all her travels. And if it had something to do with her skin, it may have been a very personal thing. Like she never felt like that was her path in life. So she went down another one and may feed into more about why she was doing what she was doing.
Okay, so now that we've solved that mystery, let's move on to the passport/identification documents, whatever it was she was using to use all these various identities at all these various places. So where would she have gotten all of these identification documents? If these were valid, legit passports, then yes, they would have been incredibly expensive and difficult to get. But I think that is where we go wrong. That is the assumption we make that throws us off a little bit in this case, because it's possible that she was using documents that were less formal, possibly much easier to get, particularly in a time of refugees and instability when governments were issuing documents with less proof than one might expect. Remember, this is still the post-war era. In 1970, World War II had ended 25 years previously. Just for context, 9/11 was 25 years ago this year. So not that far away and still very unstable. And you still had a lot of refugees, and the international community was dealing with this. And in fact, there were various conventions that were codified in the 1951 Convention on Refugees, which specifically allowed for the issuance of travel documents with relative ease. Because think about it. You're someone who fled Germany in 1933, and you moved around for the next 12 years until the end of World War II. You didn't have a birth certificate. You didn't have any kind of identification. It was very difficult for you to prove who you were. And so they set up these very simple systems where you could go to various offices and say, hey, I'm this person. I was born this place. I got nothing but my word to convince you of that. And based on these conventions, they would issue identification documents. And in fact, you might think, well, this is 1970. Surely by then that's all wrapped up. No, the convention was actually expanded in 1967 to continue to deal with this issue. So at the time that she's doing this, it would have been fairly easy for her to get documents with different names, different addresses, different birthplaces with relative ease if she was interested in doing that, even if she wasn't connected to a government as sort of an intelligence operative. If for some reason she just wanted to be different people in different places, she probably could have gotten these documents based on these conventions. Now, we don't have the documents. They are lost, possibly burned, so we can't say for certain, but I do think it is perhaps less mysterious than we think now. Like now it just feels like, man, how could you even do that? We're so tracked in everything we do. But back then, it wasn't necessarily that way.
So then there are the sightings of Isdal Woman. Really, they're sightings of anyone who is found or not found in cases like these. So there are unconfirmed sightings after she left that hotel for the last time. In 2006, so decades later, a witness came forward and claimed to have seen a woman matching her description in the Isdal Valley 5 days before she was actually found. He said that she was dressed for the city, not a hike, walking in front of two foreign-looking men, and appeared resigned to something. The witness claimed he tried to report the sighting at the time, but no one was interested, so he came forward again in 2006. I don't think there's any record of him trying to come forward previously, but of course, if he's saying he tried to come forward and they ignored him, then there wouldn't be a record.
Now, there's a few problems with this, and I'll just tell you, this report is one of those facts that just dwarfs everything else in this case, right? People have seen this report and they have just ran with it. This is what happened. In fact, when we started researching this, this was one of the few things I remembered about the case. I remember that she was found, and I remember that before she was found, she was seen with two men. So obviously she's going to be murdered by those two people, right? But as Alice said, the only reason we had to believe this is this person's word. It was 36 years later. So maybe they'd be forgiven for this. But he specifically says 5 days before she was found is when this happened. Well, she disappeared 6 days before she was found. And remember, on November 23rd, there are multiple contemporaneous reports about smoke rising from the valley that day. And given the fire, it just really seems like she died on November 23rd. She's found on November 29th. So she would have already been dead, most likely, when this person saw this woman. And once again, matching her description, what does that even mean? And recall, this is an area that people in the city, they would go to. They would walk this path. This was not unusual for people just like on a lunch break to head out, right? And take a little walk. So seeing someone in the city not dressed for the valley isn't necessarily unusual. So I think we can't discount this sighting altogether, but I feel like I don't put a lot of stock in it, and it does not move me much when I think about my theories of this case.
I think it's fair to basically discount the sighting this many years later. Not because this person has any ill intent, but it's just 36 years later. And it's very specific on the timing, and it's just really hard to verify anything like that.
And if you just think about any case we've covered with lots of different sightings, there are always sightings that end up being wrong. So even if this was a legitimate sighting, it doesn't mean it's her. It just means it's a woman with two men out for a walk. Okay, so that concludes our sort of look at the evidence in this case. Let's talk about theories. And we're just going to start with the answer because that's what we like to do.
Well, we like to not hide the ball.
Yeah, we don't hide the ball.
So let's just go with it because it's already been 40 minutes, so we should just do it.
Okay. The Isdal woman was a vampire hunter. And we have solid evidence for this. I mean, she has this transient lifestyle. She's moving around constantly. She's hiding her identity. She doesn't want to be tracked. She is using garlic in excess to ward off any potential attacks by the vampires. I think it's even possible she was a vampire herself, but also a vampire hunter. So she's kind of like Blade. It's like an early version of Blade.
Well, literally she had blades. You know, it was a little...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Probably to sharpen all the twigs she was finding in the Isdal Valley. So she couldn't walk around with stakes because that's weird. You can't walk through the train station with that.
It's also possible that the garlic was some sort of, that we've gotten the lore wrong, and that garlic actually protects vampires from sunlight. And that what she did was she went out to the Isdal Valley. She just wanted to look upon the sun one time before she died. And then, of course, what happens when the sun hits a vampire?
She wasn't burned by fire. She was burned by sun.
Exactly.
Boom.
And that's why the fire is very surface level. That's why it's connected to her death. And so...
And that's why her hands were up as well. She was trying to reach for the sun in her last movements.
Exactly. So, and can you dispute it? Can you deny it? Can you prove it's wrong? I don't think you can. So, vampire hunter. That is theory number 1. And I challenge you guys out there to disprove that theory. Good luck.
And by the way, no tags, not because she cut them out, not because they're secondhand, but because she herself is the vampire and she's had them for centuries.
Oh,
the tags have worn off, and the reason she has furs is those are the only clothes that can endure in all this time.
I love it. It all comes together.
It all comes
That's
together.
why you come here, guys.
You're welcome.
The hard-hitting truths. And that one's that one. Okay, so now some less likely, but nevertheless, I think things we have to go through. Theory number 2. The Isdal Woman was a spy. And this has been probably the most popular theory out there amongst people in the gallery and who've discussed this case with us, is that she's a spy, and this is probably the most popular theory in the case, that she was a spy for some different nation, not Norway, obviously, and that the multiple aliases, the tags and brands removed from the clothing, the frequent travel, the moving from hotel to hotel, the switching rooms, the fact that she's going to such great lengths to conceal her true identity, these are all pointing to her being some sort of spy. She also traveled extensively across Europe. She recorded her travel in code, a basic code, but nevertheless in code, to the point that there is one city that begins with R that we don't know which one it was. Now, she must have had fake passports or identification documents to accompany her aliases, which would have been hard to come by for the average person, though, as we noted earlier, possible, but still difficult, easier if you just have a government providing them for you. It was very uncommon for a woman to travel alone at the time, so it would be peculiar for her just to travel for fun, though one might note that also would bring some tension to her that maybe you wouldn't want if you were a spy. This theory is supported by the fact that she spent time in Stavanger, where Penguin missiles were being tested. At the same time, the testing was occurring. It was also during the Cold War, so spies were not unheard of, and obviously there are various things about her that point to Eastern Europe, and the KGB was very active across Europe at the time. If she were a spy, the question then becomes, how did she die? Was she assassinated? Was she killed by a counter agent? Was she killed by her own nation to cover something up? Was it possibly a suicide? Someone could have killed her when they discovered she was a spy, or maybe whoever sent her killed her. If they had discovered that she had potentially blown the operation, maybe because she's being so overt about who she was. It's also possible that she could have killed herself if she had been discovered, instead of potentially ruining whatever operation she was a part of or facing some sort of retribution by the nation that had hired her. But, whether murder or suicide, the means was strange. Maybe not what you would expect. Frankly, I think if you look at most spies who've been caught and killed, they've either been just captured and executed by the nation that captured them, or very sort of quick, dirty bullet to the back of the head, thrown in the bay type thing. This sort of poisoning, which would have to be sort of a forced overdose, which is a very strange way to do it. Then the lighting of her on fire, also a very strange way to do it. These are things that cut against the spy theory.
So another theory is that the Isdal Woman was involved in some sort of criminal activity. So some people suggest she was involved in drugs, forgery, theft, or even sex work. If she was involved in any of these risky business ventures, she could have been murdered for just being in the wrong crowds. Something as small as someone owed her money, or she owed someone money, or they didn't like what she sold, or any of these things. It could just be being in the wrong crowds. But the thing is, it doesn't really explain her behavior leading up to her death. She likely would have spent more time in the larger cities and would have made more of an effort to blend in if she were doing illicit activities. By almost everyone's account who saw her, she stood out. She was not blending in. There also wasn't any evidence found with her belongings that suggests she was involved in any sort of organized crime. She didn't have drug paraphernalia. She didn't have residue of drugs on her. She had eczema cream, for crying out loud. She wasn't dressing like a lady of the night. Many people saw her in these hotels. She wasn't hiding the fact that she was talking to men, but none of it seemed in a romantic way. There weren't droves of men coming in and out of her room for really minutes at a time, as you would expect if it were, say, the sex trade. So the things we see about her don't seem to fit other types of criminal activity. But her elusiveness, the fact that no one's been able to peg who she is, does fit the profile of someone who may be in these sorts of businesses and not wanted to be identified.
And, the one thing about her being involved in some sort of crime, it's an attractive theory. We don't know a lot about her, but we've spent a lot of time with her, right? I mean, she's been to a lot of different places. And you would think if she was involved in some sort of crime that there'd be some evidence of it would have popped up in one of these places, right? They would have found sort of a weird check or something. But you don't really see any of that. I mean, you see her having these conversations with a couple people, but I mean, honestly, you have as much for spy, right? I mean, her down at the docks, talking to the people at the docks, and her talking to the German officers. So it's just not a lot there. I mean, it's a good theory, but not a whole lot there. Now, whatever the case, whether she's a spy or she's a criminal or she's something else, obviously there's this question of, was she murdered? Or did she decide to take her own life? And some people have speculated that the evidence points to her wanting to end her life. That's why we see her out in this beautiful place, as we discussed earlier. You have all the pills that she's taking, which is an unusual way to murder someone. And frankly, the fire, if you're trying to stage a suicide, you wouldn't do that, right? Like, the fire is one of those things. You would only burn someone's body if you murdered them. So you murdered them, and everybody's going to know you murdered them. So you burn the body to cover up the murder. You wouldn't stage a suicide and then light somebody on fire. It's a very strange thing to do. The only way it would look like a suicide and yet their body be lit on fire is if the person who killed themselves did that, right? It's such a weird thing that it can only be consistent with suicide itself. You wouldn't plan that. And so a lot of people pointed to that. Maybe she was escaping from an abusive partner. She had some problem at home. This would explain why she was hiding her identity. It's less sexy than the things we talked about before, but it's equally valid. And it could explain her death, even though it's a little unusual. But it's possible that she was tired of running. She took all these steps to conceal her identity, to get away from this person. This is pure speculation, but remember, she's talking to people who are official looking, and they don't seem to be giving her what she wants. The discussions with them are not leading to, there's no joy there. There's no agreement there. There's no hugging there, right? Everyone who describes these interactions with other official looking people describe them as being sort of very serious. Possibly she was attempting to get somewhere with these people on something that mattered to her. She failed, and she felt like the only option was to take her own life. And it's possible because suicide, as we all know, has a huge stigma attached to it, particularly in 1970, particularly if she's someone who's very religious, and she might not have wanted her family to know that that's the way she went. And so she took all those steps to conceal her identity, not for any sort of reason that has to do with spying or theft rings or anything else, but simply to prevent her family from finding out that that's how she ended her life. And of course, mental illness is always a possibility, though I will say, if she had some sort of mental illness, she did a really good job covering it, right? I mean, depression obviously would be a different thing, but if it's some sort of, she has all these identities because she has some sort of schizophrenia or something, she's not giving any obvious signs of that. Mental illness is a pretty popular theory in this case, but I actually don't think there's a whole lot to support it.
And then there's that the Isdal woman was in hiding. So some people speculate that the Isdal woman was just running from her life. Maybe she was escaping an abusive partner or some other problem at home. This is a theory in a lot of our cases. We're just on the other side of it, right? We have all these cases of missing persons. And one of the theories is always, well, did they really just run off and start a new life in a foreign country? Well, we know that Norway is a foreign country for her, very likely. And so maybe we're just on the other side of it. This is the escaped new identity. Now, this would explain why she was hiding her identity, but it wouldn't explain her death. Did she kill herself after going through all this incredible effort to conceal her identity and start a new life? Or did someone maybe find out her identity, kill her? But why would they do this? If it doesn't seem to be for money, her luggage was still there. She doesn't seem to have had a lot on her and by way of things of value. So what would be the purpose of her seemingly gruesome murder, especially in a place that doesn't typically have crime?
So those are sort of the popular thoughts that people have on this case. And I guess that brings us to our theories.
Guys, if you're like me, getting ready in the morning is chaotic. I have to get 4 kids ready, fed, and out the door. I can barely even think about how I look. But here's the thing. I need to be able to get out that door and look professional because I'm going to court. I'm meeting with people. I'm seeing you guys on the podcast. But I hate that heavy caked on look that most makeup comes with. And I just don't have time for a long drawn out makeup routine in the morning with all I have going on. That's why I am obsessed with the Jones Road Beauty Miracle Balm. It is incredible because it enhances my skin instead of masking it with layers of makeup. It allows me to look effortless and natural, even though it's elevating how I look. And it's so clean. I can use their highlighter, bronzer, blush, lip tint, and it's the ultimate no-fuss multitasker. And the best part is it's so fast to use. I don't have to use brushes, and there's no complicated routine. I can just use my fingers and get on with my day. So those busy mornings are so much easier with Jones Road Beauty. You guys have got to check out the new eyeshadow stick, which Jones Road Beauty just launched, and it's already a staple. Its creamy, high pigment eyeshadow stick is designed for real life. You can swipe it on, blend it with your fingers without any brush, no fallout, no fuss. I love it because it's beginner friendly and incredibly easy to use. That's exactly what I'm looking for in my makeup routine. It's launching in 8 universal matte neutral shades, so you will find something for you. And what's so great, it's dermatologist tested, so you know it's going to match whatever you need for your skin type.
Modern day makeup that's clean, strategic, and multifunctional for effortless routines. For a limited time, our listeners are getting a free shimmer face oil on their first purchase when they use code Prosecutors at checkout. Just head to jonesroadbeauty.com and use code Prosecutors at checkout. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And here we are in March, which is International Women's Day. It's a moment to celebrate women's strength and progress. There are so many women in my life who have played such an important role for being there for me to help me learn how to be the woman I am today. And here's the thing, there are expectations placed on all of us every single day, especially us as women. I've had lots of pressures in my personal life and my professional life, and therapy is something that is amazing and available for everyone to help you figure out the balance and to set healthy boundaries to become the best you possible. It can help you find support overall for your well-being. It doesn't just have to be for situations where you face trauma. And BetterHelp is here to help. They have quality therapists who work according to a strict code of conduct, and they're fully licensed in the US. They also have a therapist match commitment. They do the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your therapy goals. All you have to do is take a short questionnaire which identifies your needs and your preferences, and their 12 plus years of experience in industry-leading match fulfillment rate means that they typically get it right the first time. But if you're not happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from their tailored recs.
Your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/prosecutors. That's BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/prosecutors.
I'll say this. We have not talked. I've not read your thoughts, and I have not shared my thoughts ahead of time, but I have a feeling, just because, we've done this for so many years, we may end up close to each other. So I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but I know you'll expound probably upon it if you agree. So, top line, I think she was a spy, and I think she committed suicide. But I think it's much less exciting than what many of us may build it up to be. I don't think she was a spy in the sense that we think of Hollywood or whatnot. but rather I think she likely was a very low level, low importance gopher, an intelligence courier, really. I don't even think she rises to the level of being called a spy, but rather when there are a lot of people who pass along information, there can be an entire chain and none of them actually know the full picture because they're not important enough to know. But maybe she knows one of the 10 keys that put together will have a bigger piece of information. And she was essentially a courier, someone who took information from one place to the next. And I don't think that she herself had much information. She knew that she was doing work probably for some sort of counterintelligence, but she would probably not even call herself a spy. And I think she was chosen because she was untied to anyone. I think there is truth to this. She likely was born at a very tumultuous time politically, and she probably didn't have parents who were alive anymore or parents she was connected to. She wasn't married. She didn't have a close network because she was probably a refugee in her growing up years. And so she was probably picked to be an intelligence courier because no one would be looking for her if she were to disappear, nor would anyone really know her enough to be able to look out for her because she had no strong community ties with anyone for them to even think, this person was connected to someone. And here's the thing. I think she was relatively unimportant in terms of intelligence because she wasn't wealthy. So the work she was doing was not garnering her a lot of money. She wasn't dressing in the most expensive clothes. She looked nice, but there was probably a way to look nice that did not mean she was actually wealthy or rolling in the dough. And she wasn't staying at the highest end hotels. And she was also of the lack of importance level where if she were caught, no big deal. Like it didn't really matter to whoever she was carrying the information around for. That's why no one went to go look for her body when she did go missing, because if she were found and if her belongings were found, it was no big deal. So there was no cover up for her either because she wasn't important enough for whoever she was working with to cover up her existence. The level of information she had wasn't that important. And I do think it was suicide and it was completely self-inflicted because of the pills. I think when you take that amount of pills, it would be really difficult to force anyone to have that amount go down your throat in those quantities. And I think when you are at that level of inebriation because of the alcohol and the pills, that anything could have happened with the fire. I do think that the fire happened with her. I don't think someone came upon her and set the fire on her. I think she was trying to burn something or not in her right mind, or maybe wanting to ensure that all of it was gone, what have you. But I think that this is not some counterintelligence assassination attempt, because if it were, it honestly would have been done better. And they would have gone after her luggage and that would have been wiped. And all of the passport cards and all of the sign-in sheets at all of the different hotels would have been confiscated and found and destroyed somehow. And they would have found her journal and eviscerated it. None of that was done because I don't think anyone killed her. I don't know why she ended her own life. There could have been a lot of reasons. This could have been a very lonely life. It could have been as easy as the intelligence currying was over. Now what was she supposed to do? Like there's nothing left to do and this had been her whole life and now the project was done and there's nothing more to do. And she quite literally doesn't have a home. She's been on the go in 2 suitcases her entire life. That could be a very existential point in one's life to think there is no tomorrow. So I think she's actually more infamous in death than she was in life.
You know, one day, Alice, we're going to cover a case and we're going to completely disagree. One day that's going to happen. But today is not that day. So
is that what you think too? We really have never talked about this.
I know. So I have a variation on your theme, but okay. So first of all, I think there are 3 mysteries in this case. Who was she? What was she doing? And how did she die? I think those are the 3 mysteries. I think the 3rd mystery is the easiest one. I think you are 100% right. I don't even think there's a question that she killed herself. I think that's obviously what she did. I think one of the reasons I wanted to include that listener's email earlier is I think that's basically what happened. I think she took the pills with the alcohol. She then began to destroy things with fire that she wanted to destroy, including her passports. I think that's what happened to her identification documents, is that she burned them up, and that essentially the pills and the alcohol hit her a lot faster. She got kind of sloppy. There was a flash fire right as she's dying. I don't even think she necessarily suffered at all, really. I think she died right there from the pills, and there was the fire. To me, that's easy. I just don't even think there's a question. She wasn't murdered. This wasn't some elaborate cover-up. That's how she died. The other two questions are much more interesting. I'll start with the first one, who she was. Okay. I think she's either Jewish or Romani. I think there are two options. I think she was born in the Nuremberg area in the early 1930s. I think that when the Nazis came to power, obviously they had a lot of policies which were very difficult if you were Jewish or if you're Romani. Romani more commonly known as gypsies. The people across Europe who've been persecuted everywhere they went, including in Nazi Germany, many of them were murdered in the concentration camps, along with Jews and political dissidents and a lot of different groups. I think at that point, she moved west into France, possibly all the way to Belgium. It's also possible that she moved in increments. I don't necessarily know that her family went with her. I mean, one of the really tragic things that happened during this time period was children were separated from their families. There were a lot of Jewish families, Romani families, who could not afford to move their entire family out of Germany. And so they sent their kids. And there were a lot of these different almost underground railroad type things run by Catholic nuns or friendly synagogues or just people in these other areas that were sympathetic to what was going on and were moving these children west. It would have seemed safe to move her to France, perhaps, in 1933. Then, of course, in 1939. And remember, what do you have with her? You've got these radioactive isotopes in her teeth, where they're showing that she's born in the Nuremberg area, but then as she's getting other teeth as she gets older, it seems like she's moving west. You have this very unusual combination of the way she spoke and the way she wrote and the languages she used, which almost feel like someone who has no language, has no set identity, right? So I think she's moving west. I think the war starts. I think that when the Germans turn and go to France, by that point, she may already be in Belgium. She may have grown up in Belgium. She may have spent her formative years in Belgium, living on those French-named streets and growing up there and always thinking about those places. But what I think happened is when the Germans invaded, I actually think she went to England. And if you look at the radioactive isotope map, and they have this if you go to Death and Ice Valley, which is great, it includes England. So it's concentrated mostly in far Western Europe, but it also includes England. Why do I think she went to England? Number one, because the radioisotopes make it a possibility. Number two, because she did speak English, though she could have learned that anywhere. Based on one of your emails, I have a theory about R. So remember, there's a town called R, and it's a place that she went in between her travels, and it's a place the police could never identify. They thought maybe it's Rome, maybe it's Rotterdam, but they were never able to find in Rome or Rotterdam any evidence of this person's existence. But there's another town named R, and I'm going to pronounce it two different ways because I don't know how you pronounce it in England. Reading or Reading. So however you pronounce it in England, someone can correct me. So outside of London is this place called Reading. We're going to go with Reading. It was the Reading Railroad, right? If you're in Massachusetts,
I always
it's
thought
Reading.
it was Reading, but I could be wrong.
Well, it depends on where you are, right?
I really don't know.
It's Reading in Massachusetts, so maybe it's Reading in England. Maybe we should go with Reading. Fine, Reading. Okay, so the way it worked, if you were a refugee, either Jewish, Eastern European, Romani, whoever you were, fleeing west from the Nazis, if you got across the channel, you first go to London. That's where you start out. But very quickly, you were then moved to surrounding towns to assist the war effort, right? One of the big places that people were sent was Reading. Reading was a huge center for refugees, immigrants, people fleeing the Nazis. It was an industrial town. Most of the people who were Jewish started in Reading, though here's why I think she may actually be Romani. Most of the people who were Jewish moved back towards London. So they started in Reading, but they made their way back towards London, whereas the Eastern Europeans tended to stay in Reading. So I think it's possible that Reading is her base of operation. Why do I think this? In addition to that little bit, there's the maps. Okay, so she bought these 3 maps of Norway. This map over Norway, which is not just like a basic map. It's a much more detailed map than that. And as we learned, one possibility for the things that are written on the map is the way you would have written the price in England in 1970. And that tells me that she planned her trips to Norway, not in Paris, not in Rome, but in this place where she bought those maps. And it looks like she bought those maps in England. So I think her base of operation, R, is Reading. I think it's the place that she ended up after the war. So I think the reason she uses all the Belgian stuff is because she's not going to use England, because that's where she's actually from, right? That's where she actually lives. That's where her actual base of operations is. But she has this deep connection to the place that she spent the formative years of her childhood, Belgium. And so she's using these names that she remembers from that time for all these various identification documents. So that's where I think she was from. Now, what was she doing? I think there's two really strong possibilities. One is that she is in some sort of organized criminal gang. So the Romani people, as most people know, have a stereotype, and it's that they're involved in various frauds, right? And this is a stereotype they've been fighting for a very long time. But the stereotype, much like the whole Italian people are all in the mafia, does have some basis in truth. There have been organized Romani gangs for a very long time. How do I know this? I've prosecuted one. When I was in the Eastern District of Virginia, we had one that was running this scam across the country, very sophisticated scam, but not also, where they would buy breast pumps. This is the way the scam worked. They'd go to Target as soon as Target opened. They would buy the most expensive item in Target, which was this one breast pump that cost like an ungodly amount of money. It's like $800, right? They'd buy the breast pump. They would then immediately return it and get the money back. But Target had this policy of not marking your receipt because they didn't want people to feel like they didn't trust them. So that was their policy. The second thing they had was their receipts did not, I don't know what the
register?
Word is. Yeah, I mean, basically, it wasn't until the next day that all of these receipts would be organized in the computer, whatever the word is I'm looking for. So these folks knew that for 24 hours, they could return that breast pump over and over and over again, get their money back, and the receipt wouldn't show as returned. So they would go from Target to Target doing this with basically fake boxes that they had bought that looked just like the breast pump box, that had these like parts in it that looked like breast pump parts, but actually weren't. So if anybody looked in there, they'd be like, okay, they're in there, right? And they would just return this over and over and over again, just driving from Target to Target doing this. And they would make thousands of dollars a day doing this, returning these every single day. This is what they did. Anyways, so like this is a thing that happens. So it's possible she was a part of something like that. And that's why she has all these different identities and she's moving from place to place doing it. But I don't think that's it. Whether she's Jewish or she's Eastern European or she's Romani or whatever she is, I think she was some sort of very low level intelligence person. She's not a spy. She's not James Bond, right? She's not Jason Bourne. And frankly, those people aren't James Bond and Jason Bourne. Those people have one identity. It's a deep identity with a lot of background. If they were in Norway, they would look Norwegian, or they would have such obvious business in Norway and everyone would know it. They wouldn't be mysterious at all. It would be like, hey, there's John Smith here to buy a bunch of fish. He comes here all the time to buy fish. And it just so happens to buy fish where they're having the penguin missile test, right? But everybody would know that he's a fishmonger, right? That's what he does. He would have this deep history with everybody there with the same name. And everywhere he'd go, he's establishing his identity. He's not trying to cover up his identity. He's establishing it. Every restaurant he goes to, he signs the same name. Every plane he gets on, he uses the same name. He does this until he's caught or until he needs to change identities, which might happen, but it's not literally happening every other day that he's trying to change identities. But if he was, or she was in this case, like Alice was noting, some sort of low-level courier, then what might be important is not hiding their identity, but hiding the trail of their travel, right? That might be much more important than who they are. It's where they came from. Where were they before they were here? And because she changed her name and used different names everywhere she went, unless you have that notebook with those names in there, or with those numbers that you can track, you'd never know it. Like if she had burned that, this would still be a mystery. But we wouldn't have half the stuff we talked about. We wouldn't have any of these false names or any of these false identities because she covered her tracks so well. It would be really hard to backtrack and follow her because she's not using the same name. Even on the plane she arrives on or the train she arrives on, she's using a different name. So I think it actually is possible, if not probable, that she was some sort of low-level intelligence agent just currying information, going from place to place to do whatever she's supposed to do. And in one of our legal briefs, we talked about a case where exactly this happened. There was the guy who was the spy, and then there was the guy who acted as the go-between, who took the hollow nickel down to the embassy, right? I feel like it's much more likely she's someone like that. And I think a lot of possibilities, I think you've already hit on them for what happened. The job could have been up. They could have decided not to use her anymore. The meeting she had could have been with people who were handlers who were telling her, you're done. We're done. We're closing this operation. Don't care what you do after this, but it's not going to be with us. And she's meeting with them. Maybe she's even trying to convince them to let her do this, right? What nation she's working for? Don't know. Hard to say. There's things that point both ways. But I think probably in the files of some intelligence agency, there's some very low-level person who fits the general description of the Isdal Woman, and that's who she was.
And I think the fact that she's striking to so many people is exactly why she was picked. She spoke multiple languages. She was kind of difficult to place in terms of where she was from. And it may have been as simple as she was striking. She caught someone's eye. It was like, she seems unattached. They watched her for a while. She seemed like a woman who didn't have, a family and could speak multiple languages, and you couldn't exactly place where she was from. And they thought, you know what? She can carry the mail. And the thing that made her stand out to other people may have been what stood out to maybe a couple naval officers who said, let's use her. She doesn't have enough information to do anything bad, but she's the exact prototype of the type of person we want to be able to carry around mail, essentially.
There's a couple things about her. I think, unfortunately, and I think this woman had an incredibly tragic, unstable life. Honestly, whether she was a spy or a criminal or a nobody, I think my description of what happened to her, she was born, essentially, for the entire formative years of her life, is accurate. It's possible, put aside the spy thing, it's possible the war's over, she tries to go back to find her family, and they're all dead. And she's got nothing. And she's just sort of like adrift. Now, she did something for those 25 years, and it was something that gave her the means. I mean, this is why I feel like she was involved in something like this. It was something that gave her the means to travel, to dress well, to have disposable income, right? I mean, she did have some money. She was able to get around. And so I don't know what is in between there, but I think she was doing something for those 25 years, and then it came to an abrupt end in 1970. One thing I'll say about this case, I would, for my own selfish reasons, love to know who she is, but I don't know if I want that to happen because she clearly did not want, I think it's patently obvious, she did not want people to know who she was. She didn't leave anything, because I think she did take her own life. She didn't leave anything saying who she was. She left no identification whatsoever. She had lived her life as a ghost up to this point. And so there's part of me that thinks identifying her is so against her final wishes that I'm not sure that I really want that to happen. Obviously, if it does happen, I think it'll confirm or disprove a lot of things we've talked about. But I mean, I think we're moving in a direction where probably eventually she's going to be identified just because of genetic genealogy.
Yeah. And I do think, just adding to that tragedy, talking about just who she was as a woman, I think that's exactly right. I think she had a pretty tragic life. And I do think she was doing something meaningful for herself, but I don't think she had a lot of connection to people in her life anymore outside of her control, because I think she was ripped from her family or the political atmosphere, what have you. But I keep coming back to those spoons, because I told the story earlier of how I was gifted these like silver spoons from my husband's grandmother, who lived to 104. So these spoons were like 90 years old, right? They were incredibly old. And some of them were missing, but they were like the real silver spoons that you would make like a century ago. And I think she had so little that still tied her to her old life. And the fact that she had those spoons, I think is heartbreaking because I agree with you. I don't think she wanted to be identified. I don't think she felt it made sense to identify her because everyone that she knew was gone. So like, what was the purpose in some ways? But obviously we are all craving to belong. And there was a time when she did belong to something before it was ripped from her. And for some reason, those spoons come back to me because to carry around all those spoons, I think is because she had no home. I think she did live out of those bags. And I think being a low-level courier was not only exciting, but purposeful and meaningful and made her belong, even if she didn't know who she belonged to. She may not even have known who exactly she was working for or what the purpose of her specific actions were, but she was part of something greater. Like we all crave when we want community. We crave community or family because we crave to be part of something bigger and more eternal. And whatever she was doing gave her that. It was bigger than herself. It was bigger than the sum of all its parts is greater than just the little part that she was doing, but she was getting to do something that mattered. And I think that was likely coming to an end because I don't think she was dying from anything else. She was relatively young, relatively healthy, it looked like. And there was no need for her to end her life except for kind of the emotional, psychological side of things, which is that there may have been nothing more in her perspective to go on for if she was also ripped from the only family she had left.
No, I mean, I think that's certainly possible and even likely. And if you notice, it feels like if you follow sort of her path over Norway, we start seeing her meeting with people towards the end of it. That's when she's meeting with the guy in the room. That's when she's talking to the guy at breakfast. And I just wonder if this was sort of her last effort to get back in the game and she just couldn't. And it was the only thing that gave her meaning. She had nothing else to do. And so maybe she even spent like the last money she had on this last trip around this place that she thought she'd been before and she thought was beautiful and she loved it. And that's where she wanted to see the end of her life. So,
and by the way, I don't think it was necessarily a dramatic end. I don't think she messed up. Some people have said maybe she messed up and this was her like penance. I don't think actually she messed up. I don't think she did anything wrong. Projects come to an end, especially if you're low level. They have no need for whatever you were doing. And it doesn't make sense. Much less dramatic. I don't think she screwed up. I don't think anyone was after her. I think they may not even have known this happened to her because she was no longer part of their checklist. I'm sorry, ma'am, your period is over. So they may not even know that her life was ended because they were never going to call her again.
Spy agencies are just giant bureaucracies. I mean, there's some excitement there and, you know, things happen, but they're also just giant bureaucracies. And giant bureaucracies don't care a lot for the people at the bottom. But look, there are no wrong answers in this case. I mean, there might be. Vampire Hunter might be a wrong answer. But because we don't know. So we're interested in your thoughts, what you think happened here. Shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Let us know. Give us some reasons for it. You know, back it up with some evidence, point to some things like we always do. We're always happy to hear new theories. It's funny because think about this case. This is a case that's really hard to do sort of the Occam's razor thing with, right? Because I don't actually know what the quote unquote simplest answer is. The simplest answer might be that she's a low level courier. You know, I don't know. It's usually pretty easy to find the simplest answer, but in this one, it's kind of hard to me because you have to explain a lot of the stuff she was doing. And it's possible she just was sort of a paranoid person. And so maybe she was a paranoid schizophrenic. She always thought people were following her. And so she changed her name. But nothing else about what she's doing fits with that. You know, she isn't showing any of the signs of schizophrenia that you often see with people that are in the throes of that. So it's hard for me to say that. But we want to hear your thoughts, as I said. If you want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, @ProsecutorsPod. Join the gallery. Been a lot of great discussion on the gallery, which is our fan-run group page on Facebook. Great place to be. A lot of discussion of this. You guys will enjoy it. But I think that's all we have on the Isdal Woman. This has been quite the journey, but can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. Alice, I know we've run a little long.
Let's do a question. We didn't do a question last time, and neither of us are physically dying right now. So
I know, it's such a rare thing. Okay, so this person wants to know, and by the way, if you leave a 5-star review, you can ask any question you want. So this person wants to know, if you could have prosecuted any serial killers in the world, Who would it be?
What if we could create any?
Prosecute.
Oh, prosecute. I was like, I don't want to create any. Oh, really? Any of them? Okay, let's think. I don't know, because some of them are creepy. Like, I don't want to learn more about John Wayne Gacy. Like, I don't want to know more about, because those are some of the most disturbing murders I've ever heard of in my life.
I've been circling around buying a painting of his for a really long time.
I know you've told me this, and I don't know why you would do that. That is terrifying. So once... Okay, go ahead.
So I had a guy who did this. He was like a broker. He found John Wayne Gacy paintings, and he would find one every now and then, and he'd email me and be like, hey, I got one. Do you want it? And I was always like...
Is it still for sale?
Do I really want a John Wayne Gacy painting or not?
You don't.
I don't know. It's kind of like drinking beer from skulls like the Vikings didn't do. I've always thought it would be cool, but then it's like, but it's like,
but do you really want a skull?
Do I really want to drink from a skull?
Do you really want the hand that murdered so many in such vicious ways and senseless ways to have painted what is on your wall? So here's the thing. So you guys know that I used to be a performer, and I once did a dance, like it was choreographed. I did not choreograph it. Did I choreograph? No, I did not choreograph this one. It was a beautiful dance, but it was to Sufjan Stevens' John Wayne Gacy. And it's a beautiful song, fantastic song, beautiful song. I mean, the lyrics are very evocative, and it's about John Wayne Gacy, as you can imagine. And usually there's like, it's kind of like prosecuting. There's like the wall, right? Where it's like, this is your artistic life or this is your professional life, and then there's real life. That particular piece stuck with me. I would wake up with nightmares. I was John Wayne Gacy in the nightmares. Like, I was doing those horrific things. I could not separate it. And like, neither could anyone else who was doing this piece. And it was just too much. Like, by the end, I was like, the last time I performed it, I was like, I've never been happy to see a piece go. And it was a beautiful piece. It won so many awards. Like, it was a great piece. But I did not. And I usually love all my pieces, especially the artistic ones, and not that one. So not John Wayne Gacy, because he haunted my dreams for a period of time.
See, now I really want to get a John Wayne Gacy.
No, because you're going to freak me out with it. I know what you're going to do.
Right there. So you have to look at it every time.
Don't do it. I'll come over and like put holy water on it.
Maybe I can get Hannah to do like a John Wayne Gacy style painting.
That I am okay with. It's that his hand is the one who painted it that I'm not okay with, because that is just like evil spewing from his hands onto that canvas. And I don't want you to have that in your house. Just
the paintings of him as a clown. I mean, it's like
terrifying.
So
terrifying.
Awesome in a dark way. I'll say Lucy Letby, because everybody thinks she's innocent.
Do people really think? I'm sorry, I don't spend enough time on the interwebs.
It's like everything else.
They think
she got convicted. She was obviously guilty.
Obviously.
Then like all these people who didn't testify are like, I'm an expert and I don't think she did it. And it's like, okay.
No, she very clearly did it. I didn't even know that was like disputed.
Like,
I don't want to spend my time prosecuting her. She's already been convicted, because that's an easy case, I guess.
That's the thing. You know, people want us to cover it, and I'm like, I don't really want to cover it. I mean,
that's too sad. That one's a sad one.
Sad.
I don't know. I don't know if I can cover babies right now.
I mean, she writes in her diary about murdering the kids.
She says that,
she talks about, like, is she the Satan or whatever?
Yeah, she clearly is a disturbed woman.
Yes, you are, because you're killing babies.
Yes.
It wasn't just, she's not just unlucky. She didn't just happen to be there when all these babies were dying, and then they didn't die when she wasn't there. Are there other people who I think are responsible for letting her to continue to do what she did? Sure. But saying the hospital should bear some responsibility is not the same as saying that she didn't do it. So, and what's interesting to me is the more people started talking about the hospital might be liable, the more medical experts were like, maybe she didn't do it. Maybe it was just an accident.
She absolutely did. Now, they may have been like played a part in allowing evil to continue, but they were not co-conspirators in it. She was the one who was killing.
As Joe pointed out, Jessica looked into this case and was convinced Lucy Letby was guilty.
That's all I need.
That's good enough for me.
That's all I need. If Jessica looked into it, then yes.
All right, guys. Well, this has been awesome. As always, we'll be back next week with a new case. I haven't actually decided what it's going to be. I've got like a bunch of different things. I went to Lidditz to meet with our 6th grade kids.
I'm so sorry.
Recently, Alice was there in spirit. And
I was about to get on the plane, and you guys can appreciate this. One kid threw up, and then a second kid threw up, and I looked at Brett, and I was like, at this rate, the nanny's going to be throwing up, Mr. Alice is going to be throwing up, and all 4 kids are going to be throwing up. And just for the record, I don't even think I told all of this to you, Brett. By the time you landed in Lidditz, 3 of the 4 kids had thrown up. Nanny was sick, and husband had to go to urgent care. So for once, Mommy Dara was like on point, but I'm very sorry because I jilted you at the gate. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
I'm
I had a
very
great
sorry.
time.
You
I
did
love
have a
Lidditz.
great time.
It's
I
amazing.
would have rather been at Fire and Ice in Lidditz, but I was at home
awesome.
with buckets of throw up. There was one night.
I bought lots of chocolate.
This one, I know you didn't bring any of it back for me. I deserve that. I deserve it. There was the one that night that you were in Lidditz, right before the one night you were in Lidditz. Brittany threw up 4 times in 1.5 hours, and I had to wash 4 sets of sheets. I ran out of sheets. I was like,
That's rough.
I don't know what else to do, kid.
I was hanging out at the bar in Lidditz, drinking.
You were. You had the
awesome.
better end of the deal, but I did jilt you at the gate, so I'm very sorry about that. Lidditz is amazing. I wish I were there.
But we got a great case we're going to do with them. I'm not
It's a great
quite
one.
ready to do it next week, so I don't think we're going to do it next week.
Their artwork is fantastic.
I have so I'll just multiple options, and then we'll see what. So there's the Lidditz Kids case that we covered. There's a case from a country that we've never done a case from before that I'm thinking about. And then there's an innocence case that we've been circling around for a while. So 3 possibilities.
Gonna be fun, y'all.
Next week, or maybe it's going to be a 4th one that I'm not even mentioning. So I don't even know. That's how we roll.
That is how
we'll
we
see
roll.
what happens. If, by the way, you join Patreon for $3 a month, the low price of $3 a month, you'll know before anybody because we'll record it live with you maybe in a couple days. Like, I got to decide fast for the patrons. We're going to record multiple times this week. So anyway, all right. Well, that's all we got. We'll be back with something next week. It'll have something to do with true crime or mysteries or something. Who knows? But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
They're like, thank goodness, because Alice is rambling. Can you tell us how you came to call your son Squanto? Yes, this is a long-running descriptor of my son because I think it's been 2 or 3 years now. He has a true devotion, and I do not say this lightly, nor with any guile. He has a true devotion to Squanto the man. He owns approximately 7 or 8 biographies of Squanto. He's 6 years old. This started when he was about 3, when he first learned about Squanto at his little Montessori school. And he dresses up like Squanto year-round, all the time.
Spoon.
He has a wooden spoon. He eats with a wooden spoon, just like Squanto did. And he truly loves Squanto the man. He knows everything about Squanto. And because he runs around shirtless with a wooden spoon and calls himself Squanto, we call him Squanto.
TV has thousands of free movies and TV shows.
I swear.
If I'm lying, I'm dying.
This is the mindset.
Free.
This is the mantra.
Free.
This is the mindset.
With movies like Interstellar, Dreamgirls, and Gladiator.
Are you not entertained?
And TV shows like Survivor, SpongeBob SquarePants, The Fairly Odd Parents, and Ghosts. Pluto TV is always free. Huzzah! Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.